If you are watching this video on the day that it goes live, it is Darkest Dungeons 1.0 Eve, and tomorrow we will be playing the game. Very, very excited about that. I've put about 500 hours into the early access of Darkest Dungeon, and I've learned a couple of things over the course of that 500 hours. So I wanted to start sharing that in the form of guides, and the guides that I felt were the most important for new players were guides related to the bosses in the game, because I think that the single biggest determiner of your success in a run of Darkest Dungeon is understanding the mechanics and the strategy of all of the various lair bosses and act bosses, and understanding what preparation you need to do in order to win those fights. So I wanted to start out there. The format that these videos are going to be taking is I have designed an infographic that encapsulates all of the critical information about the boss into kind of like a two-pager. I'll be sharing that in the video description below. But that will encapsulate everything that we are talking about here so that you have kind of a nice leave behind plus my narrative and my discussion. There will clearly be more information in this video than in the infographics. But without further ado, I wanted to start with the boss that I think is the single most valuable boss to begin with, which is the Librarian. I think the Librarian has the lowest risk to highest reward ratio of any of the bosses. In terms of the Librarian's mystique, the game says of him that he teeters madly upon his ladder, reveling in the fiery destruction of human accomplishment. It is very apt. He has 116 HP, which is the lowest HP of any of the lair bosses. I won't go through all of his resists, but the ones that I find most noteworthy is that his blight is particularly low, making certain heroes very strong against him. And his burn resist is off the charts, so the likelihood that you will ever be burning the Librarian is 0, which again makes certain heroes a little weaker against him. He takes 3 actions each turn, although one of those is for a special action that kind of moves the fight forward, and he has a speed of 4. So before we get into his moveset, I think it's useful to talk about kind of the setup of the fight. So we're over in the mechanics section right now, but the setup of the fight is that you'll have the Librarian rank 4, which is the backmost rank, and then in front of him there will be 3 sets of books. There are 3 stack sizes for these books, ranging from 15 HP to 45 HP. I couldn't find any information, nor have I witnessed enough to determine a pattern, but I believe there is a minimum amount of HP that these books will have, but their placement can be kind of randomly assigned. So let's move into the move set. So the first move is Page Burner. This is the thing that he will be doing at the beginning of each turn, and it is him burning books. He will always burn the stack of books directly in front of him. So if he's starting out in rank 4, he will be burning the books in rank 3. And he will always reduce the book's HP to the next nearest increment of 15. So if there is a stack of books with 45 HP, he will reduce that to 30. If there's a stack of books with 40 HP, he will also reduce that to 30. So a little bit of incidental damage on the books does not change the speed at which he burns them. But this sets up a bit of an enrage timer that we'll talk about later, but when he burns the books, it will randomly assign 1 stress damage to one of your heroes. The Librarian then has 3 sort of bread and butter attacks that he will be doing twice per turn. The first one is his damaging attack, Mandatory Reading. He can do this from any of the back 3 ranks. It does 6 to 10 damage, applies stress, and applies a burn for 2. Next up, we have Burnout. Burnout is an ability that he will only use if he is in the front rank. You'll notice that he has 200% move resist, but he can end up in the front rank because you can push his books around. His books are actually quite easy to push around, so if you want to get him into the front rank with shuffles, it is possible. But if he gets into the front rank, he's going to use Burnout, which will move him backwards, do 4 to 8 damage to both of your front rank heroes, light them both on fire, and give him a dodge. So Burnout, not a fun ability to be getting hit with. Perhaps the most important ability from my perspective is Smokestack. So Smokestack is another one of his regular abilities. He'll use it most turns. He will do it from any of the back ranks to any one of your heroes, and it gives him a dodge. It puts a blind and a vulnerable on your hero. This is particularly challenging to deal with, and we'll talk a bit more about it later, but the reality is it can often make your damage less consistent against him. And then last but not least, we have Categorize, which is an ability that he uses less frequently than Smokestack and Mandatory Reading. I would say his average selection of moves during a turn is 1 Smokestack and 1 Mandatory Reading. Both Smokestack and Categorize do have a cooldown, unlike Mandatory Reading, but Categorize will shuffle your party, and this can throw a real wrench in the works for obvious reasons. Then his last ability is the big one and the very scary one. This is Burning Bright. Burning Bright he will only do from the front rank, and he will only do it if there are no books left. This is the enrage timer that I was talking about. And when he does Burning Bright, he will hit all of your heroes for a modest amount of damage, 3 to 6, but he will be lighting them on fire and giving himself a dodge token. You do not want to get hit by Burning Bright. Often, if you are getting hit by Burning Bright, you are fast watching your run slip out of your grasps. But that's enough about the moveset. Let's talk about the mechanics. So we already discussed the setup. The three stacks of books, the sizes, are in the upper right-hand corner there. And as I mentioned, his first action is going to be Page Burner. So he's going to be burning books every turn. And once he runs out of books, we've talked about the enrage timer. But the way that you can think about this is the number of turns that you have to defeat the Librarian is the cumulative health of his book stacks divided by 15, assuming you don't do any damage to the books. The books have low burn resistance, so if you do anything that lights them on fire, like, I don't know, tossing out a magnesium rain, you can potentially hasten your demise. Also, importantly, if you have abilities that do damage, like let's say you have a Hellion who's doing toe-to-toe in the front, you can often do 15 damage to a set of books, setting your taunt up. Each time he completely burns a stack of books. So, he's in rank 4. Let's say it was a 30 health stack that was directly in front of him. He burns it the first time. The second time he burns it, he reduces it to 0. He kills it. He moves forward. And then he gets a free action where he does a Burning Bright. So he will do damage to all of your heroes, give himself a dodge token. So there's a bit of like inequity in his round economy, because on turns where he's going to be completing a stack of books and burning them, he's going to be doing a large AoE to him. But now we have to talk about kind of the big scary thing. So the Librarian, when he runs out of books, is going to start casting Burning Bright twice per turn. This is particularly bad news, and really importantly, it also comes with a heal for him. It's slightly under 30 HP of heal, but when he goes into this enraged or ignited form, he's going to be dealing a huge amount of burn to you on a very regular cadence, twice per turn. Actually, I think 3 times per turn, because he won't be doing Page Turner, and it's going to get real ugly real fast. The last piece of mechanics before we start to talk about strategy for the Librarian is that he does have a passive. Anytime he successfully lands a burn, he's going to be adding 1 stress to the hero. And also, as I already mentioned before, he will also be using Burnout anytime he's in the front and has the ability to move back. So that kind of covers the mechanics. That's what the fight's going to look like. And if you don't want to spoil yourself and you want to develop your own strategies, you can stop watching here. But let's talk about how I actually go about defeating the Librarian. So this is the backside of the card that I have designed, for lack of a better description. And the place that I want to start is with my 10,000 foot view of the fight. So from my perspective, the fight is relatively low stress and relatively low damage. Neither the damage nor the stress are the particular scariness of this fight. This fight is really a DPS check to see how much damage you can do in rank 3 and 4, because that's where he's going to be spending the majority of his time. And can you do that while also mitigating the fact that he's going to be throwing out blind tokens, he's going to be gaining dodge tokens. So he has a lot of mechanics that make your damage less consistent. And if you don't do enough damage before he gets into the Burning Bright phase, he's going to blow you up. I've also gone ahead and divided the fight into what I think are kind of like the 6 core things to be thinking about when you enter into it. The first is, how valuable is Taunt? And I think Taunt is very valuable in this fight, because if those smokestacks, which is the blind applying ability, are landing on your tank consistently, you're going to have a much better time than if they're landing on your DPS and causing you to say, like, let's say he lands smokestack on your highwayman who has a crit token from take aim, and all of a sudden you miss your crit. Those types of tempo losses can lead to him getting all of the books burned. How much healing is required versus how much stress healing is required. I put these both relatively low at 4 and 3 because, as I mentioned, this fight is not really a healing check. You don't need a ton of healing. A little bit of dot cure goes a long way in this case. I ranked that a 6 out of 10 because having the ability to remove fire, if let's say you don't have high fire resist or you haven't prepared to have enough fire resist on your tank, those dots can definitely stack up and they can cause a lot of problems. I think probably the single most defining element of this fight are the tokens, though. The blind and the dodge tokens, and having answers for those when you critically need them is really important. Having the appropriate combat item to strip away a dodge that he just gained so that you can land that crit hit or land that dot is really important. Overall, though, I put the Librarian's lethality at a 4 out of 10. This is a fight where, with proper planning and a good understanding of the strategy and the mechanics of the fight, you can do really, really well. So let's talk about strategy. The first and primary piece of the strategy is understanding how you're going to be dealing your backline damage. So there are certain abilities that are really good at applying backline damage. And by selecting abilities that allow you to get that damage to the back line, you're going to do really well. If you are struggling to do damage in the back ranks, by the time he gets to the front, you're likely not going to have enough damage to get him all the way down. If he gets to the front and gets that heal off and starts spamming Burning Bright, you're going to be in really rough shape. It's also important to note that dots act really quickly on this boss. Because he has 3 actions per turn, you can throw out, let's say hypothetically, a plague grenade, and the entirety of its damage will potentially be done, assuming you didn't crit, before it even becomes time to apply it again. So you're getting a lot of value because dots deliver more damage over time. The next critical element, as I mentioned when I said that the tokens were particularly important, is that you need to be able to control where the blinds are going and strip away his dodge. To that end, I think that certain heroes are better than others at doing this, but the idea here is really you don't mind that your tank, in this case, is blinded, as long as your other heroes are then free to actually land their abilities on the hero. Having the ability to strip away those dodge tokens can also help to make this a lot more consistent. But first and foremost, the blind is really going to throw a wrench in the works. If you have a Plague Doctor sitting in rank 4 and they miss 2 Plague Grenades in a row, that is a massive amount of damage that you have completely lost the opportunity to apply to the Librarian. The next little tip here is just that a little book damage is not a big deal. Because Librarian is always applying damage and reducing it to a multiple of 15, it's okay to say use a Hellion and use toe-to-toe on the front stack of books in order to develop some taunt tokens, because it's not going to change the overall cadence of the fight. The flip side of this, though, is that if you get some unlucky crits, you can do a lot of harm to yourself by removing one of the turns that you otherwise would have had to do work. So you don't have to worry. You can use Plague Grenade basically free of charge, because the likelihood that you are going to do 15 damage with a Plague Grenade is relatively low. Abyssal Artillery is relatively safe, although often I will use Demon Pull instead. But overall, you don't have to worry a lot about dealing damage to books, but you should be a little careful not to overdo it. The occasional crit have hurt me pretty badly in this regard. The next thing to talk about is moving and killing books. This is a tricky one. The previous incarnation of the Librarian, you had a lot more time to do the damage that you needed to do. So sometimes killing a stack of books for the Librarian could be advantageous. The reason is that it prevents him from doing the Burning Bright, which also potentially prevents him from getting a dodge token. But for the most part, in his current incarnation, unless you are very, very, very strong, I do not think that it is smart to damage the books kind of like with the active purpose of destroying them before he does to save the Burning Bright. That being said, if he's about to destroy a stack of books and you have a shuffle, you can sometimes move that stack of books out of the way in order to delay a Burning Bright for a little bit. So one of the stack of books in rank 3 is on 15 HP. You could potentially use your Plague Doctor to shuffle it with Disorienting Blast into rank 4 or even move it forward, and then he would no longer kill it, which would mean he would no longer get the free action Burning Bright. I will say, though, in that example, I would probably argue that another stack of Plague Grenade is more valuable in killing the boss quickly than avoiding that kind of incidental stress and minor burn damage. And then the last, and this is probably the most important gotcha of the fight, is don't forget that he heals when he enrages. When all of the books are gone, his HP pool overall increases, and he gets a heal when that happens. And if you are not expecting it, it basically guarantees like at least 2 turns of taking Burning Brights, which is a very scary proposition, especially for your more squishy heroes. So you really got to get him dead before the books are exhausted. So with that, let's talk about some heroes and some duds of this particular fight. The number 1 star from my perspective is the Plague Doctor. Plague Grenade is so good at putting in damage. He has a low blight resist, so it is particularly solid. In that same vein, I think the Grave Robber with Poison Dart is also exceptionally good. Very, very strong option there, because Poison Dart is doing decent damage as long as it's upgraded, and can target just rank 4 or just rank 3 and also just rank 2. So it has a lot of flexibility. The Plague Doctor with the combination of Plague Grenade and Noxious Blast has the same thing going on. Also on this list is the Man-at-Arms. I think the Man-at-Arms is great because of Retribution. I think that Retribution has a few good things going for it. The primary thing being that it is dealing damage back, it is potentially stripping away dodge tokens, and the Man-at-Arms is just a solid tank. The one challenge that I think the Man-at-Arms has in this fight is that he cannot keep up his taunt consistently unless you are running the path that makes Stand Fast also generate taunt. The counterpoint of this, and you'll see on the duds column over there, the Leper. The Leper has what I consider to be the single best taunt for the Librarian, but the single worst kit for dealing damage to the Librarian. So if you want someone who is just a straight tank and has nothing else going for them, Intimidate is the best taunt. It is spammable every turn, which means that 100% of the Librarian's actions will end up hitting the Leper. It also hits rank 4, which means you can use it to strip away dodge. So the Leper is in kind of a funky space here. Other heroes that I've mentioned in kind of the stars column, I think that your Highwayman is exceptional in this fight, just because Take Aim has the ability to remove blind if you pick some up. And then the crit tokens with Pistol Shot are really nice, very flexible. And then I do think that the Occultist performs particularly well here, just because they are a high damage backliner. You can use Burning Stars, you can use Abyssal Artillery, you can use Demon Pull. All of those are particularly solid. The other and perhaps more notable dud from the list of heroes is the Runaway. The Runaway has the problem that her primary source of damage is fire, and you are never burning the Librarian. The other challenge is that her kit is not great for helping out in general with the problems that the Librarian has. Her blind slash vulnerable ability is not great because you're primarily going to be doing things like plague grenading the back rank. You're not expecting big hits. So it's a tough sell. I think that taking the Runaway to the Librarian is generally a problematic decision. I will say this is a great example of where you could potentially swap in a Bounty Hunter very effectively to go to the Sprawl. I will also note one ability that I put on the skills list here, but is not owned by the stars, is Iron Swan. Iron Swan is a relatively hard hitting ability, which makes it really nice. I think the Hellion as a tank is also pretty good because of toe to toe. You have the ability to generate enough taunt every single turn, and you have Iron Swan to give you that little bit of a head start on the damage early on. In terms of the rank analysis, I wasn't entirely sure what to put here. The Librarian very evenly spreads damage and blind if you don't have taunts up. That's why I put those icons there. But I think the really important piece of this is just that the value of damage attenuates as the Librarian gets closer and closer to the front, right? Being able to deal tons of rank 4 damage makes the Librarian a very safe and straightforward fight, whereas requiring the Librarian to get all the way to rank 2 before you can do a bunch of damage is a spicy proposition, to say the least. So last thing I want to talk about is just some noteworthy drops and the preparation that I think you should do for the Librarian. The Librarian is pretty straightforward from a preparation perspective. I think that picking up some ablative powders is huge. Ablative powders have a innate fire resist that comes with them, and they stress heal you when you resist a fire dot, which means that your tank, like let's say it's a leper as an example, can keep that taunt up, take 100% of the abuse from the Librarian, and not really see their stress spike up at all. Soothing poultices are also particularly useful. They increase your hero's innate fire resist. So if you're at the inn, you know you're going to the Sprawl and you have a soothing poultice, that is the time to utilize it. The greater heat shield especially is also useful if you don't have particularly useful trinkets and you want to get your fire resist up. Ichor Bomb is probably my favorite of the dot-based single target ones. It provides a lot of blight damage and just is generally a good one. In a pinch, it can also be used to strip away dodge, but I really like Caltrops for that. If you're carrying around an item, caltrops, linseed oil, any of these things can be used to strip away dodge, which can be very helpful. The 3 items that I am looking for from the Librarian, if I had to only pick 3, is Snappy Swig first and foremost. If you've watched any of my runs of Darkest Dungeon, you will know that Snappy Swig is the bee's knees. The fact that it provides crit tokens is just wildly valuable from my perspective. The Librarian's Trophy, specifically the one that provides a fire dot on crit, is also an absolute favorite of mine. The value that comes from high crit teams is particularly compelling in Darkest Dungeon. And especially when you have crit tokens, you know that you're going to be getting that extra damage, and that extra damage in the form of dots is going to very often deliver death blows before enemies have the ability to act. So we really love the the Librarian's Trophy. I think it is probably my single favorite trophy of all of them. It does come with a little bit of a downside that you're occasionally going to be lighting your own heroes on fire, but it is worth it, absolutely. And then last but not least, the Smoldering Hymnal is just lovely because it provides extra actions on kill, which means you can get some really sick combos going. The combination of Snappy Swig plus Smoldering Hymnal is an all-time favorite, and the fact that Smoldering Hymnal is also giving you strength tokens, it's kind of a match made in heaven. So overall, I think the Librarian is absolutely worth seeking out. huge value for the risk. And the risk is relatively low if you understand that you are going into the region and you level up abilities that have the ability to hit rank 4, you have some strong dot damage or some strong damage that you can put out rather quickly. And I'd say it's generally rare that I run a run of Darkest Dungeon 2 and don't find my way to the Librarian because of that really solid value proposition of risk versus reward. So what I'm going to leave you with here is if this video was valuable to you, please toss me a subscription so you get these future videos as they come out. They'll be coming out over the next week or so. Toss a like if you can. It helps out a great deal. And I'm going to leave you with some footage of me successfully defeating the Librarian so you can see me kind of in action, doing what I do and winning a run rather cleanly. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your day and enjoy the fight. Bye-bye. No snappy swig for us, unfortunately. I think we'll still do it for the loathing reduction. Now, like I said, we're in not great positions here. Oh, these are some very short stacks of books.
The Librarian must be destroyed.
E for effort. So I can afford to do the move here. I will do this, hoping for the bleed. That's going to keep stress under control. All right. Not doing anything on the first turn is a little spicy. I'm not gonna pretend it's not. Okay, we're hoping for 2 lucky crits here. Now, how long does ablative last? 3 turns? Alright, we should be chilly then. Get this going. Okay, not bad. Now this will hopefully keep his dodge in check. Okay. Not having to deal with categorize is good for business.
An opportunity squandered.
Okay, we still have 2 turns, so let's put some damage in. Still have a taunt, so yeah, we just roll the dice on that. We're gonna take 1 uncontrolled hit, unfortunately, here. It's okay, that's not the end of the world. Good hit. Now, we do have a stun opportunity here. This is one of the few bosses that can get stunned. Alright, we'd love to see that. Get the retribution up. This one is all but over. Hit you with the ablative so the stress stays under control, and then keep going. Oh yeah, before we get the kill though, I want to oh no, wait, we did this one, actually. We don't need to. Would have been nice if that had hit, but
We have enough control that I think the Divine Comfort is just going to top us up a little bit. Just get rid of the dodge.
Calculation, perhaps.
Getting a blind on our Highwayman is a little annoying. That's also a little annoying.
For who knows what lurks in the beyond. Haste and carelessness, hallmarks of the unprepared.
I think this is the safe play to get control going again. But we're playing with a bit of fire here for sure. Ooh, that doesn't get the kill. I thought that was gonna get the Death Door. All right. There we go. We got out without too much abuse. We probably pushed it a little too hard there, but we do have a team that's not great at
trade and learned.
Snappy Swig and Smoldering Hymnal? Oh my word. Wrong trophy. We might use it anyways, but ooh, I didn't do combat items before we started this.
He teeters madly upon his ladder, reveling in the fiery destruction of human accomplishment. Well done.
Yeah, I forgot to get my ablative powder on my bar. I don't think it's gonna make a huge difference, but like we've lit this guy up pretty solidly already, and the blind will probably prevent too much trouble. Look at your hit points. The second smoke bomb was probably greed there, but
Malaise, measured and steady.
so disappointingly, we're not going to be getting the kill before the first books go away. That would have been super cool.
Strength
'Cause I don't think I've ever done that before, but yeah, sadly, one set of books will be taken down. Alright.
So unpleasant in the extreme,
Snappy Swing and Smoldering Hymnal is insane here.
and necessary.